and welcome to Hubli's workshop on automating the client prospecting funnel. We are going to be beginning with speaker introductions, and then we will move into answering the question, what can you automate? Followed by our workshop on automations, and then ending with a Q&A. So without further ado, let's move into speaker introductions so that you know who is giving you this awesome workshop today. So we are joined by Olivia Law, our workflow expert. So Olivia brings her amazing energy to Hubli in every training call, using her expertise to build and implement thousands of workflows and automations for all of our customers. Ron is the COO and co-founder. Ron has worked hands-on with over 100 financial advisory firms and their support teams to help fully optimize Hubli to enhance their business. To date, Ron and Olivia have helped create over 10,000 customized workflows, and over 140,000 client relationships have been managed through these workflows. So these two know a thing or two about workflows. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to you, Ron.
Awesome. Thank you for that awesome introduction, Tessa. So I'm going to help answer the question of what can we automate. And to start us off today, we're going to be really focusing on two types of automations. So on the next slide, you're going to see the first type of automation. The first type of automation that you can do is with Zapier. And this is an automation basically that helps data flow between your systems. Zapier can help you listen to new events as they happen. So as new mailing list signups happen in your MailChimp, as you have new calls scheduled through Activity or Calendly or Schedule Once, or new emails come in into your Outlook or Gmail, Zapier can trigger certain activities to happen and actions to happen in other software. Today, we're going to cover how we can use those triggers to actually automate some actions in Hubli. The second type of automation is the automation you can do in Hubli. The automation you can do with the data that you have already collected on a client. And today, we're going to really help you leverage everything from the calendar dates that you record back into Hubli to the way that you categorize clients in Hubli with streams and tags, and all the way through with the way that you stay on top of the tasks in a workflow with sequential reminders. And we're also going to show you a couple of rules to tie it all together. Without further ado, I'm going to have Olivia share her screen. Since this is a workshop, please feel free to try to follow along in your own hubs. I do recommend that you open up a tab and log into Hubli if you're a Hubli customer, and I see many of you in attendance today. And then take a look at your prospect workflow. Today, Olivia is going to demonstrate a bit more of a prospecting process, and you can feel free to try to replicate it on your own, as well as look back at the recording if you wanted to go ahead and build it out after. And if you need any help, as always, you can always message us, and we're going to come back to that at the end. Liv, can you walk everyone through this prospecting process that you created and show us exactly what happens when a new prospect comes in the door?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure many of you have probably seen a process that looks very, very similar to this in your own hubs. So I built this out in advance. Generally, it's just going to show what happens when a new lead comes in to your practice. So when a new lead comes in, I need a place to keep track of them, and I need to know when to follow up with these clients or potential clients. So as leads come in, however they come in, I can just add them into prospecting one new lead. I'll create the client card and add them in, really simple. As soon as we get a meeting scheduled together, I just move them into prospecting number 2, which is the intro call / meeting workflow. And then once we've had a chance to chat, I'll add them into prospecting 3. So that's just where I keep all of my post-meeting steps, follow-up, notes, recording anything that needs to happen. Once all of that's happened, all the next steps have occurred, I've got 2 extra workflows here at the end. So one reminds me to follow up if I don't hear back, and the other one is if this prospect decides to become a client. So it's a really simple 3 to 4 step process from lead, meeting, to becoming a client.
Awesome, I love it. And this way it helps you stay on top of exactly where these prospects are in this process. And as I can tell, you have a 2-week follow-up, which allows you to make sure that you don't have any prospects or opportunities to really slip through the cracks, which is super.
Exactly.
So to start us off today, could you start off by demonstrating how you actually go ahead and create that new contact and add them into Prospecting One currently?
Yeah, it's actually really easy because you can do it straight from Hubli. You're going to see I've got a privacy filter on here, but essentially all you have to do is press add clients and then type in the name of the client that you want to add. From there, you would just click create a new client and you can add in their email address here. From there, the client's created and you're going to see that my new client Jacob has been added into Prospecting One. Once he's been added in, I can open up his client card and then manually add him into my leads stream. That's really easy to do just by pressing leads, scrolling down or searching, and opening him up. I also want to add in a tag, which we call lead drip here. That's going to trigger a drip campaign email that I have set up in my CRM, which now this client, Jacob Richards, is now in my CRM because I've created him in Hubli.
That's one of the really good things about tag groups, because they do sync back to your CRM, is that since your CRM really is that hub of data around the client and has those integrations with MailChimp, with your other email marketing software, you can very easily set up an integration in your CRM, whether you use Vaultbox or Redtail, to monitor a specific tag like lead drip here, and then go ahead and add a client to a mailing list when they're added into that tag in your CRM. That way you can automate and enroll new prospects in campaigns the same way that Liv is doing here. Awesome, Liv. So I know right now you're doing that manually. So after you created Jacob, you went into the client card and you manually attributed both the stream and the tag. Can we demonstrate right now to the audience how they can go in and add an automation for that, so that every time they add a client to the workflow, Hubli can do a little bit of that work for them?
Yeah, it's super easy. So the way I did that, just to open up the workflow by double clicking on the workflow header, I'm going to head into this automation rules section. It's really simple. You just press add rule and then add or remove stream or tag rule. From there, I'll press configure and we'll configure the rule. So as we already demonstrated, the stream that we want to add is the stream leads. So I'll add that in and then change it to add leads when a client is added into this workflow. And then we can just add that rule in there. I can also add a rule here or I can add it as a separate rule, or I can even edit this rule to add in the tag lead-drip. And then I'll just add them both in at the same time, anytime any client is entered into this workflow.
Amazing. And then what happens if the client moves on to the intro call meeting? Because as a part of that workflow, you probably want to remove the lead drip because you don't want them to continue to receiving those drip campaign emails, since they picked up the phone or replied to an email and scheduled into that intro call.
Yeah, so that's really simple. As soon as a client is moved into this introductory call meeting, I already had this one set up here, you can do the exact same thing, just switching the added to section to remove as soon as a client completes that workflow.
Amazing. And that way they're not going to be receiving ongoing drip campaign emails as you continue on.
Exactly. It really allows you to segment everybody who's in whichever stage of your prospecting process.
Amazing. And then the last but not least, we can also set up a similar rule for your very last workflow, the exit step, where when the lead has decided to go and sign, they no longer need to be a part of the lead stream, and you can probably add them to the new.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really simple to do. Again, it's heading in, adding or remove stream or tag rule, you'd configure. So I'm going to want to add this stream here, new clients, when a client has completed the workflow, because that's after they've signed it. At the same time, you also want to make sure that they're not categorized as a lead and a new client at the same time. So you'll go ahead and set up a second rule. You need to remove the stream leads as soon as they complete that workflow, and then add it in. Really easy.
Awesome. And now we can see that new client will be added when they complete the workflow and leads will be removed. Amazing. So that's how Hubli can help you really quickly stay on top of client categorization. But then I noticed that when you look at Jacob here, you have a couple of calls. So you have a first call, a second call, and a third call. How do you pace these apart? Are these all calls you do in one day, or do you set a reminder right now for the next call for a couple of days out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would definitely not do them all in one day. I feel like calling 3 times in one day is a bit much for me. I would like to space them out probably about 2 days apart. So that I remember to make sure that these calls happen, it's really easy to just set a reminder. So I'll show you how to do that right now. The first reminder that you'd want to set is just really simple. As soon as a client is added into this workflow, I want to set that reminder immediately, just so that I get alerted that someone's been added in there and there's action that I need to take.
And that's on the first. So that's
exactly. So that's the call number 1. Call number 2, I'm going to want to set this up probably so I can call them about 2 days after I've completed that first call. So this way we're setting it up, it's called a sequential reminder. I want to add a reminder when the preceding task is completed after just 2 days. Then I selected 10 a.m. because it seems like a reasonable time to make a phone call. That's really easy to add in. From there, call number 3, we're going to add that in exactly the same way. When the preceding task is completed, just setting this reminder after 2 days again at 10 a.m. This way, I'm going to get an alert into my Hub feed and also into my emails if I want to turn that on to make sure that I keep following up with these new leads.
Perfect. And that basically makes it really easy for you to stay on top of these. And for those of you that are following along, you just hit the add reminder button, same as Liv did. You might not see it defaulted to 2 days as it was for her, but you can adjust that. You can make it 2 days, you can make it 2 weeks. You can really pace out these calls in such a way that it helps you stay on top of them over the first week or 2 to stay top of mind for that client. And if you paired it with a lead drip campaign that you automated through an email merge or mail merge software, then the client could be getting calls and emails paced a couple of days apart.
Ron, can I just jump in here? We have a question that's relevant to what you both went over. Pierre was asking, what's the difference between a stream and a tag?
Great question. So really the difference between a stream and the tag is where it is displayed in the client card and then how it's synced out of Hubli. So Olivia, if you actually want to go ahead and hit done on this workflow, we'll reopen that client, Jacob. Awesome. So as you can see, streams are displayed along the top, and the recommendation is that we really see a lot of our firms use is to use the streams as a high-level category. So really indicating client the status of a new contact, whether they're a lead, whether they're a lost lead, if they're a new client or an active client. And you can also use streams to stay on top of client needs. So as you go in and you have that first meeting, the intro call with Jacob, you can record down what the needs are. We've really subdivided the needs here by the specific components of a financial plan. But for you, you can keep it high level. You can have different streams for managed clients, where you have assets under management, streams for one-time planning, so fixed term where you're delivering a financial plan, or ongoing planning for those clients that stay on with you long-term. So streams are there to be customized and to provide a high-level overview of who the client is and what's important to them. And then down for the tags, tags can really be used to track any kind of keywords or other subcategories. You can use tags for individual projects that you do. In this case, we're using a tag to track that this specific contact is in a drip campaign that we've set up for all new prospects that are coming in. Tags do sync back to your CRM. So whether it's Wolfbox or Redtail is going to pick up that tag for each client. Streams live just in Hubli, and you can automate both the same way that Olivia has just shown you. Awesome, great question there, by the way. So now that we basically set up those automations that automatically attribute streams and tags and automatically progress the client through from a lead to a new client when they're done this process, we went in and we've added those automated reminders to help you stay on top of those calls every 2 days. The last thing I wanted to show in this section is how to actually set up our first automation with Zapier so that when these leads come in, you can actually automatically have them added to the prospecting one new lead workflow. And as a result, you'd automatically get a reminder to give them a call. So Liv, today, in this example at least, do you have a scheduling form or a just a submission form on your website that you use to collect these prospects?
Yeah, I for sure do. So I just set up this really, really simple Google form. I called it new prospect interest form. And basically this could be using any kind of functionality. But essentially it's just a little bit of information gathering. So the information I'm asking for is the full name, the email address, and the phone number of any potentially interested prospects to my firm.
And for those following along, you can also use Google Forms if you're a Google client, and you can embed these forms so that they just capture the field values and don't look like this on your website. You can also use HTML forms that redirect into a spreadsheet in Outlook, or sorry, in Microsoft 365 or in Google. Or if you already use Calendly or Schedule Once or Acuity to give your interested prospects a chance to just schedule a meeting with you, you can actually use those forms as the data points as well. And we're going to show you that a little bit later on in this workshop. But for now, whatever form you use, as long as it's supported by Zapier, which you can tell if you go to zapier.com and you search up the software that they integrate with, then what we're about to show you, you'd be able to do as well. So if you jump over to our help page here, Liv, we actually set up this helpful article, and we can actually add it into the chat here as well. And this article, basically, you can follow along with yourself, and it's going to show you how to go into your Hubli settings, go to the integrations tab, and then under the Zapier setting, under more, you can select integrate. So if you're in Hubli right now, you can follow along and try that out. Your settings is just in the top right corner of your screen. If not, you can actually go into the chat on this Zoom call, and Tessa just posted that help article there as well. So you can open that up and follow along, bookmark it, and come back to it after this workshop. But in this example, Olivia has already went in, integrated our hub with Zapier, and accepted the invite to build out this app. So what we're going to show you now is what that Zap looks like. And we're going to try to go slow so that you can follow along as well. But the key elements of how to set it up, we're going to cover. Awesome. So Liv, I'll pass it over to you. If you can open up that Zap and kind of give people an overview of what are these 3 steps and what do they accomplish in Hubli?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, I've already set this Zap up just so that everything is in order. This is essentially pretty much what your Zap is going to look like once it's been set up. So the first step in any Zapier integration is a trigger. First of all, that's what you need. In my case, it's that Google form that I just showed you. But for you, it might be a Calendly form, a MailChimp, or anything else that you've been using to prospect new clients. It's really simple to set up. As you can see, I've just chosen the Google form as the app and event. And then the trigger is just having a response being entered in. The next step is the actions. Actions is where the action happens. And for you, these are going to be exactly the same as the ones that I've set up and that I'm about to demonstrate right here.
So basically, with that form that you set up, by integrating with the form, now Zapier pulls in. So with the actions, I'm going to demonstrate what you can do with those fields. I just want to slow that down just to make sure that we were clear that it was really that simple, because when a submission is made, all those fields get now sucked into Zapier, and now Liv can take those fields with the action in a target application, in this case, in Hubli.
Yeah, exactly. So as you can see here, I've got 2 actions set up. You'll need an action to find or create a client in Hubli, and you'll need an action to add them to your workflow, also in Hubli. So first of all, we're going to go over how to create this first action. You would just press add there. I already set it up, so I'll open it up and show you on my screen. So your app and event that you're going to need to choose is always going to be Hubli in this case. Really nice and simple right there, just the app that you're going to be using. The event type or the action event that you're going to be needing to do here is find client. That's the first step. You can't do anything else until you've got that client in your hands. Once you've selected your account, which is just going to be your regular Hubli login that you use every single day, it's my hope anyway, you'll be able to set up your action. And it's going to look pretty much exactly like this. You always want to search via the email field because the email address is going to be the unique kind of identifier that's going to be good for each individual client. You can also select an option down here at the bottom to create a new client if this client doesn't already exist in Hubli, which is often going to be the case when you're bringing in, right, like new leads, new prospects. Now, as you remember, in my Google form, I did collect the full name, the email address, and the phone number, but really all that you actually need is the client email and the full name. Everything else you can create later. So that's pretty simple. Once that action is created here, you're going to need to create the final step, which is assigning client to workflow in Hubli. This action, again, you set it up in the exact same way. You're going to see that Zapier, once you get into it, is really, really simple to use. You're going to, again, choose your app and event. The app is obviously Hubli, and your action event, you want to assign your client into a workflow. Again, you'll choose your account. That's just your regular Hubli login address. And then to set up your action, your hub ID is going to be the name of the hub that you usually see right at the top of your screen. And then you'll need to find your client ID. It's really simple to find. You can just go ahead in here and you'll pull that from just this little down arrow here. So you click into client, you go down to step number 2, which was your first action, show all options, and then find the client ID from there. Once you've done that, you'll select the workflow that you want to add the client to. As you remember, it's going to be prospecting one new lead. We've got it up right here on the screen. You can just press the down arrow and you'll be able to search via the name of that workflow. From there, that's literally complete. You can turn the Zap on and it'll be ready to start firing.
Amazing, Liv. Well, we have a couple of questions that came in here as well. And before I get to the questions, I just wanted to give a quick summary, which actually might answer a couple of the questions in themselves. So that first trigger, again, could really be any data source. If you use a form, it can be the form. If you use a spreadsheet, it can also be a spreadsheet. I see a question there from Heather about using Smartsheets. And if Smartsheets is integrated with Zapier, then you can use Smartsheets and monitor new entries in that spreadsheet. So, but the idea is that if you're already rekeying your data into Smartsheets every time, you might want to set up an automation that automatically puts them in to that Smartsheet so that you don't have to do it manually still. You want to eliminate how much you do manually every single time. And then we have another question there about whether Zapier should be listed under connected apps or available apps. I believe it's always going to be under available apps. And even when you've connected it, you can still select integrate and it'll still open you up into Zapier. You just won't see the accept invitation step. And that means that you've already been connected previously. Now, to give a quick summary of this, what we basically did here is when a lead comes in, we first find or create a profile for them in Hubli, which automatically creates a profile for them in the CRM as well, if one doesn't exist. And then we take that client that we found or created in step 2 by ID, and we assign them to a workflow in step 3. So, Liv, if you want to flip back over to Hubli and just show everyone Betty Lou and which workflow she would have been added to when she was created.
Right here?
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so one second.
So basically,
So
when you're in Hubli here, that Betty Lou was the client that we had in the example in Zapier. And
oh yeah,
she would have been added into the prospecting one new lead workflow. And so basically that prevented you from having to do it manually on your own. In this example here, we already you progressed Betty Lou into the intro call meeting. So that's why Betty Lou is now in prospecting too. But basically we selected prospecting one new lead in that third step in the Zap. And when Betty Lou came in through the prospecting funnel, she was automatically created and added to the new lead workflow here.
That's exactly right. So once the client has been added into this prospecting one new lead funnel, I'm going to use just the example that I created earlier manually, just as my little kind of talk through to that. So, for example, this client Jacob has been added into my first workflow. I'm going to imagine here that I gave him one phone call and immediately he was super interested in working with me, with my firm. So immediately we want to get a meeting scheduled. Now to add in a meeting date, Hubli has a great functionality where you can actually add them into your client card just to keep everything recorded and in one place. So that's really easy to set up manually, no problem at all. All I'm going to do is select add meeting. I'm going to change it to intro call because that's the style of meeting that we're going to call this. And I'll say that he set it up for the beginning of next week at 9:30 a.m. And once that's saved in there, we'll be able to see, yep, that next meeting date has popped all the way up there in the top corner. We're going to check that off, mark it completed. And then we can move him straight into that next workflow, which is the intro call / meeting. And that's really easy to just set up manually. Yeah, very intuitive.
Perfect. So I know something else that you set up before was Calendly automation. And with that Calendly, basically, when you get Jacob on the phone or Jacob responds to the email, you basically use that Calendly form to find a time to meet, and that basically automates the creation of a calendar event and everything else. Now, since you do that, and right now you're basically, after you do that, you come into Hubli, you add that meeting date manually as everybody saw, and then you move Jacob forward into the next workflow. We can actually show the audience how to create our next app, which will monitor that specific meeting type in Calendly as it gets created, and then find Jacob once again in Hubli, set that date, and add them to that next workflow for you, so that when you log in the morning and Jacob might have booked that call later on the evening yesterday, he would appear right in that prospecting 2 workflow with that date set automatically.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's get right into my scheduled intro meeting. So just like in that first app that we set up, everything needs a trigger to begin. So in this case, to choose the trigger, the triggering app this time is Calendly. That's my scheduling software. The trigger event is that the meeting is created. And so literally all you have to do is log into your account and then this step is done. To set up your first action, again, you just press the plus button there. That's how you add another action. The hub selected is going to be your own hub. So we'll add in Hubli, we'll choose our account, our hub, and then the action event is again to find the client. You cannot add a client to a workflow or set any meeting dates without knowing exactly who the client is. Just as in the first automation that I showed you today, we'll be searching via email. So you'll find your hub first of all. You'll set up the client email that should be the same email address that you set up the Calendly meeting with. And it's, again, very, very simple to set up.
And so in this example here, we didn't select the option to create a new client, since we know that in our case, all of our prospects come in through that very first Zap or that first workflow. So by the time that they get entered in to that initial call workflow, we already have them in Hubli. But if that doesn't apply to you, if maybe your Calendly or Acuity or Schedule Once is your starting point for your contacts, as they come in as new prospects, they schedule calls automatically. You can actually check off that box to create a Hubli client if they don't already exist. And Hubli will first search by that email to see whether or not they exist in Hubli. And if they don't, then we're going to go ahead and create them in Hubli as well as in your CRM. So in this case, we're going to keep that checked off, but in your case, you can check it, and then you'd see those additional fields, and you just need to give Hubli the first name or the full name, the email, and if you collect the phone number through that Calendly invite, you can also select the phone number as well, just like we did in our other Zap that we showed you earlier in this call.
So now that in step 3, we found the client in Hubli, we're going to want to save the date of their next meeting so that we don't have to go in and do it manually, like what I showed you in Hubli. So again, you'll set your app, set your event. The app is always going to be Hubli, and the action event is setting the client date. To set up the action here, you'll select your hub, and then you'll take the ID of the client that we found in that previous step under the client field. I know that might sound a little bit complicated, but I'll show you exactly how to do it right here. You'll just click into this client field and go into step 3, find a client in Hubli, because that's where we're going to be drawing the information from. From here, we'll have to open it down to go to show all options. And then right here, you'll see client ID. That's the one that you want to check here. The next step is to select the client date type. So we've got meeting, that's the type of date that it is. And then we've got meeting date type. Again, we kept it really simple. We're just calling it the intro call. You can see that we've got those same 2 types here that we also had in the Hubli client card. Now, at this point, if you're in here and you're like, oh, I don't see the type of meeting that I want, that might just be because you haven't yet created that meeting type in Hubli. If it exists in Calendly, I would always recommend popping into Hubli and just making sure that that event type exists there as well. And again, you can set that up right in the client card. All you've got to do is add meeting, and then you can change the name. You can create any kind of new meeting type in Hubli, which is really, really nice and simple. From there, we're going to select the client date. Oh, wait, we already did that. The final step in this action is to actually set the date from the Calendly event. So this is where it says new client date. Now, in this case, you're actually looking for the start date in this drop-down menu that looks like the ugliest date that you can find. So you'll see you've got 1,000 options right here. You're going to want to find this really ugly looking event start time here. It's got a lot of numbers, a lot of dashes. That'll be the one that you want to select. Unfortunately, it's not the event start time pretty option that shows up just below it. Now that you've set that date up, again, you always have the option to test your action. I'm just going to close that down, and I'm going to open up the final action in this Zap. So now that you've set up that client date, the date's going to appear in your Hubli client card. We can actually choose to add this client who scheduled their meeting into the appropriate workflow so that you don't have to do it yourself. It just happens. Again, to set up this action, you have to select your hub. I feel like we could all say this together at this point, and then pick your action event, assign client to workflow. From there, you'll log into your account once more, select your hub, and then find your client ID, the same one that you found in that previous action. The workflow here that we want to move it into is the intro call / meeting workflow. It's really nice because it's the same exact name as the meeting. And that's right here, workflow number 2 that pops up on the screen. From there, again, you can test it, and then you're literally ready to turn on your Zap and get scheduling, get some new clients.
Perfect, Liv. That was awesome. So just to summarize now, whenever a new Calendly or Acuity or Schedule Once event gets scheduled for anyone, then Zapier is going to run. It's going to take a look at the event type, and it's only going to continue if it's a client call. And if it continues, Calendly is going to pass a lot of fields over to Zapier. Those are all the fields that Olivia just showed you when we try to find the ugliest start time for that event. But first, you're going to need to find the client or create them in Hubli. And we recommend doing that based on their email address, because emails are a lot more unique and the names can be spelled differently every time. So you find the client in Hubli based on the email address. If the client doesn't yet exist, so that's the first contact that you're having with them in Hubli, you can always select the option in Zapier to create a record for them in Hubli, and that would also create a record for them in your CRM. So Wealthbox or Redtail will get clients whenever they get created in Hubli, created in there as well. The next step you did was you took that client you created or you found, you recorded the meeting date so that it's recorded in the client card, and we'll show you why it's important in a second. And we took that client finally and moved them forward to that appropriate workflow. In our case, it was a second workflow. In your case, it can be the first or the third. It doesn't really matter. You just need to find the workflow by name. So Liv, if we're ready to flip back over to Hubli, take a look at that process again. We'll see exactly where Jacob would have been added into. So Jacob would have been added into prospecting 2. When we click into Jacob, then we should see that meeting date should have been added in the top right corner. And when we hover over the meeting date, the meeting type is intro call. So all of those steps would have been automated right through that Zap. Now, whoever is responsible for getting ready for that intro call could come in. If there are some preparation steps at the beginning of the workflow, they can do them. But in your case, Liv, it's a very simple workflow. You're not preparing, you're just ready for that meeting. And once you come in, you mark the meeting as complete. And it looks like you record your notes and move the client on to your post-meeting workflow.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So what that looks like, you mark it complete, there we go. And then when you hit move to next workflows, it'll move them along to prospecting 3, post-meeting steps. So the last thing we wanted to do is we want to show you how to automate this action of adding a client into a workflow around a specific meeting date. Because you'd really want to kick off these post-meeting steps, Liv, on the date of August 31st after the meeting is complete. It wouldn't make sense to add the client in before, and you probably hope that you don't forget to add the client in until a week later, because then you're not following up, you're not sending an email, and it just really ruins that new prospect experience. So I know right now you're doing it manually, but could you actually show the audience how you can set up a rule in Hubli on that third prospecting 3 workflow to just monitor for that next meeting date and add Jacob and any other client in automatically when they have that next meeting date as an introduction call?
Yeah, absolutely. So this type of rule is so handy, just to make sure that nothing does slip through the cracks. So all we'll be doing right here is setting up an important date rule. It's an important date rule because meetings are dates and they're important. To do that, all you have to do is go into automation rules, select the rule type, and then press configure to set it up. Now, to filter this down, in Hubli training, we go through really how to set these up. In this case, we're only really wanting to pull in leads in this prospecting workflow. So I'm going to add all clients with the stream leads on the day of their next meeting date. So we change the time span to directly on, and then the next meeting date will pop up there. Now, our meeting type, as you remember from everything that we've already done, was intro call. So I'll select that, and then really, really simple, just press add rule. Now, anytime that a client has an intro call scheduled in their client card, they're going to be popping up in prospecting 3 post-meeting steps so that you never ever forget to follow up with your clients again.
And you can apply this rule really in any workflow that you have for any kind of meetings that you have with a client. We're going to stay focused on the prospecting today, but really everything that we covered today, and we're probably going to cover in future sessions with focus around specific use cases downstream. But you can already probably see how you can apply those to your other types of meetings with ongoing clients, as well as with other types of meetings with the new client onboarding and initial paperwork process that you do. So just to recap here, if you hit done, Liv, we basically took an already existing set of workflows that you use today to manage that pipeline of new prospects that are flowing through your practice. And then we made it a little bit smarter. We removed the manual categorization steps. We've added some steps to even decategorize clients or prospects if they don't continue on or if they become new clients. And we went in and we added some automations to automatically create them in Hubli once they're created once they submit their interest, and add them to the right workflows when they book calls. We took those dates that we record in Hubli around those calls to just help have them all in one place. And then we created our first smart rule to move them into the post-meeting steps workflow. And the last thing that we're going to do before we open up the floor for Q&A is we're going to create a second smart rule on prospecting 3.5 to really make it easy and remind Liv to follow up 2 weeks later after that meeting so that she doesn't have to go ahead and set that workflow manually every single time. And after that, we're going to be done.
Yeah, exactly. So this one is really, really helpful because we can, again, use the leads stream to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. If you remember before, just to kind of jump back and forwards a little bit, we already set up this automation rule in prospecting 4. Once a client has signed, they're no longer going to be a lead and they'll be a new client. And I'm hoping that I can get all that done within the 2 weeks. So if by chance, after these 2 weeks, my new prospect has not yet made it through the signing process, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect with them, or at least try. So the same rule type is going to set up here. It's a client date rule. We'll press configure, and then we just want to add all clients with the stream leads, let's say 2 weeks after their last meeting date. And you see how that one just changed automatically. Now again here, the meeting type is going to be intro call because that's the meeting that they were just a part of. And then really simply, we can just add that rule in there. The nice thing about this is that it really is just limited to clients with that leads stream. So anybody that's made it already further in the process, they're not going to be pulled in at this point.
Awesome. And I think that actually helps us answer the very first question that we had, which is how do you use streams and tags? And that really is a great demonstration of how they're useful. Because if you use streams to graduate a new prospect from lead to new client to ongoing client or active client, then you can set up these automations that are limited to a specific stage in their life cycle with your firm. And that way, you can avoid having new prospects slipping through the cracks after those initial meetings, because we know you're busy. And Hubli can monitor that and add them back in to remind you to reconnect. And if that prospect's moving forward quickly, you don't have to worry about taking them out of an automation because it does it for you since you've set up all of these rules. So Liv, round of applause for you. Thank you so much for such a great demo. That was awesome. And I just wanted to kind of wrap this up by talking about which type of firm really these automations are ideal for. We really try to focus on building out these kind of automations with firms that have a growing book of business. So either you're focused on acquiring new business, or maybe you're partnering with a network that's sending you leads, or maybe you're just naturally seeing your business starting to grow really quickly over the last 12 months of this pandemic, as we've seen some of our clients really experiencing that rapid growth. we know that you're busy, and we know that your time is better spent working on the business than in the business. Even if you have a team helping you out with this, their time is more valuable than just capturing, tracking, and categorizing your prospects. So really, automations help you do just that. They don't help you take care of the knowledge work, which is the skilled work that you and your team do. It helps you take care of that repetitive tasks that hold everything up. So if your business is growing and you find that you're constantly manually capturing, tracking, and categorizing prospects, or you might be dropping the ball on some potential clients, and you're just looking to create a more repeatable experience, focusing and investing on creating these automations early on can really help you do that. And if you're not a Hubli client yet, please do reach out, and we'd love to show you this and a lot more of what we can do. Now, if you are a Hubli client, I see a lot of you are, then just reach out to your lead in the chat. Yes, we have real people. Olivia is one of them, and James is also working with a number of the firms that are on this call. When you reach out, you can ask for a quick chat, and we can set that up with you, help you set this up in your hub, or if you already took a stab at it, we can give you a sanity check, just review it to make sure that you can sleep well at night, knowing that Zapier is going to run the way that you intend it to. If you're not a Hubli user yet, you can also go onto our website, myhubli.com. You can either message us in the chat. In that case, you might reach another team member, or you're going to see a big button on the top right corner to book a strategy call. Those are free, and those are going to be paired with our team. Everybody on this team is actually on this automation call today. So you can talk about what we covered today, and you can also ask additional questions and see if Hubli is the right fit for you.
Thanks, Ron, Olivia. That was awesome. We have questions just coming in hot, so hopefully we have time to answer the majority of them. I'm going to start with this question, which is, which Zap plan do you recommend, either the starter, professional, or team?
That's a great question, Tessa, and one that actually we asked ourselves in the earlier days of Hubli. I think that the free plan, it doesn't give you multiple steps in a Zap, so that one's kind of ruled out. But there really is no need to start with anything other than starter in the early days. Starter gives you the ability to create all the Zaps that we talked about today. And once those Zaps actually begin being used and actually tracks how many times they execute, then Zapier is going to contact you telling you that, hey, you should probably upgrade to the next tier of professional, in which case you're going to be given 2,000 runs per month instead of the limit of the starter plan. Now, I know that the plans also jump in price. Unfortunately, we can't control that. Zapier is another product. But if you think about all the manual steps and all the waiting time that it's going to be saving you by doing these things in the moment, at least in our own business, we found that it was a cost worth paying.
Definitely. I am a huge fan of Zapier myself. We have a question again about Zapier, and they are wondering, is it best practice to have the Zap create the prospect in Hubli first or with Wealthbox?
Good question. So we actually always recommend creating the prospect in Hubli first, because as that happens, as Hubli users might know, that prospect or that contact gets created in your CRM instantly. Now, if you create a prospect in your CRM first, unfortunately, they don't yet return that favor to us. So your Zap could very easily create a duplicate record. So what you want to do is start every Zap the way that Olivia showed you today, with a trigger and the first action being to find or create the contact in Hubli. And then you can start adding to the same Zap additional steps in your CRM, as well as in other software, to perform more of those automated actions elsewhere. Just make sure you add a small delay to Zapier, because it is a very quick application, and it might actually create a contact in Hubli and try to move on to the next step before Wealthbox has had a chance, or Redtail has had a chance to update your own contact list. And again, if you need help with this, it might sound complicated. It isn't. It's really simple. You just click the add button, and it says the option to add a delay. But obviously, message us, and we'd be happy to help walk you through it as well.
Eric is wondering, with the lead drip tag, does that trigger a Zap, or are you able to trigger a Zap to MailChimp to trigger a campaign?
So it actually wouldn't be a Zap in this case. MailChimp can integrate with Wealthbox in your case, or I think they integrate with Redtail as well. But basically, you can set it up so that one of your mailing lists in your email software monitors that tag in your CRM. And so the way you want to set it up is that when a client gets added to a tag group in your CRM, they get added or enrolled in a mailing list. When they're removed from a tag group in your CRM, you want to have them unenrolled from the mailing list. So just an in action and an out action. And that would be an integration directly between your CRM and your email or mail merge platform. So that would be outside of Zapier.
Perfect. We have 2 more questions here. I'm going to see if we can get through them. So do you have any suggestions for setting up a workflow for moving a prospect to archived? So if they don't become a client, so how would you handle that situation?
We sure do. We actually considered including it in this demo, but we didn't want to get that complicated. You can absolutely set up, and we recommend that you set up an exit workflow to provide that kind of experience where you, first of all, can wrap things up on your end. But second of all, you can wrap things up in that relationship, even if it's short, with that new prospect. So you would just create another workflow at the end. And in this case, it would be new prospect 5 probably. And that would be basically your breakup workflow. You can set up an automated rule that says when a client completes that workflow, then you want them to be removed from a lead or a prospect stream. And you can even make another rule that says add them to a lost prospect or a lost opportunity stream. So we really do recommend that you build out a stream or a grouping of all of your missed opportunities, because you might want to remarket them in the future. You might want to enroll them in a long-term newsletter mailing group in your MailChimp or mail merge software. So by many means, yes, set that workflow up, capture all the tasks you want to do, and then you can use some automations to automatically decategorize them from leads and categorize them in any stream and tag that you want to retain that record in.
Perfect. We have 1 more question here. I do think we have time. It's a quick one. So how would you handle a situation where a client leaves a field blank, such as not entering their, well, I guess you'd have to enter your email that's non-negotiable, but maybe they didn't enter their full name?
Well, you want to make some mandatory fields, first of all. Collecting a prospect without an email might be a little bit difficult to contact. But yes, maybe they didn't enter their full name. Maybe they didn't enter their phone number. As long as they enter their email, Hubli can find that record in Hubli. So basically, if that contact only entered their first name but their full email, then in Hubli, we're going to find the full contact with the full name. We're not going to just stop at the first name. Now, if we have to create the contact, we unfortunately would create them with only a first name. And then you'd have to go back into your CRM and just update that once you've had a chance to meet with the contact and retrieve their full name, phone number, and all the other information you need.
Perfect. I think that wraps up our time here, but thank you both so much for this workshop. I've had a lot of comments coming in that this was extremely helpful. So thank you both so much today.
Our pleasure.